Good evening, it's Brent with Lykins Motorsports, and you are looking at a picture from 2003. That's a 26-year-old me with the very first engine that I ever built. So that'll be the topic of discussion for today's episode. And thank you for joining in and watching. I don't know how long this video is going to be. Just as a brief introduction, the series of events today. I had some of you may remember from other videos that I'm taking flight lessons, and my buddy Chris, he has graciously loaned me his flight bag and knee board and some other things. And I had decided to go ahead and buy those things new for myself. And I think I have my backpack from college up in the attic. So instead of ordering a new flight bag, I was just going to use my backpack. So went upstairs in the attic, got the backpack out, and it was full of stuff from college. So I graduated from UK in 2002, and when I basically got all my hours in, packed all my stuff, and had a job in Ashland, Kentucky, and just moved. So everything that was in that backpack was from when I moved from Lexington to Ashland, and then I had jammed some stuff in there from when I moved from around Ashland to Louisville, where I am now, back in 2004. So lots of nostalgia and memories that were shoved down in that backpack. And there was a folder of some pictures, and in those pictures were a bunch of photos that had been printed out of the very first engine that I had ever assembled. So you are looking at let's see if I can remember all the specs for this thing. A 425 cubic inch Windsor. When I was in college, my last year of college, I was dating a girl whose family owned a pool store. And I worked at the pool store, and I remember sitting at the countertop, and it wasn't busy, and I was looking through, it was either an Auto Trader, or if you remember from years ago, a Metro Piston. I can't remember which one was which, but I was looking through one of those magazines, and I saw a picture of a black Kirkham Shelby Cobra replica. And I thought, when I graduate engineering school and get a job, that's going to be my car right there. So I thought now would be the good time. I had always been a gearhead and interested in cars. So I thought, well, here's the time for me to start learning about engines and that sort of thing. So I remember the very day, I remember exactly what I was doing. I was calling around to various junkyards trying to find an engine core to go through, and finally found a 351 Windsor that had been pulled out of a pickup down around Richmond, Kentucky. So my friend John Jameson and I rolled down, and we basically knocked this engine core down apart, took it apart right there in the floor of the junkyard building. And I had a 1989 240SX at the time, and basically threw all the nasty, greasy parts in the block and that sort of thing, timing cover, into the trunk of the car and took it home. Um, I was a college student, didn't have much money, so everything came really slowly to me, and was able to get the block machined over time. And this was a 1979 351 Windsor block, and I would just chip away at it a little piece at a time. That Harbor Freight engine stand that you see right there, I still have that engine stand, and I still use it, and I've mentioned it on several videos that I can remember. That was my very first engine stand, so I put engines on there that are special to me when I put them together. Use that engine stand. But so let's start going through some pictures, and we'll go through the build specs. And these are pictures of pictures, okay? So don't blame me if the quality is not that hot. And unfortunately, I won't have any dyno videos, but I do remember exactly how much horsepower and torque it made, so we can go over that a little bit down the road here. So I wish I could find the other pictures that I had. I had an old computer with a lot of pictures that I had taken from an old digital camera. And like I said, I started doing this engine when I was a college student. I had an off-campus apartment, and I had an engine stand parked in the living room and sometimes in the bedroom, and had my machine block on there, and I was just learning as I went. And it wasn't uncommon for me to throw a timing cover or something in the bathtub and use the bathtub as a parts washer. But things got done, and learned a lot from it. So there was a machine shop in Paris, Kentucky. I wished I could remember the name of those guys. I think they're out of business now, but they did all of my machine work for me. And even with this very first engine build, I knew just by looking at some internet stuff that I needed the mains to be honed with the fasteners and the girdle that I was going to use, and we'll talk about that a little bit here in a second. And the cylinders needed to be bored and honed with torque plates, and the deck squared up. But I can already tell, looking at this picture, that things I did back then that I was truly learning, and I certainly wouldn't do it this way now. And you can see those freeze plugs, how they were just driven in at any old angle. Not saying that that's wrong, but I'm very detail oriented, and all my freeze plugs are always pointed up the same direction when I drive those in. But that's how you learn. You got to start somewhere. And you will not see me use a main stud girdle today. A main stud girdle is good for holding the two halves of the block together after it explodes, and that's about it. So I do remember. So I basically skipped all the easy stuff, all the easy engine builds. I didn't take a 351 Windsor and just go through it. I basically chose the most difficult route the first time around. A main stud girdle that required a lot of grinding to clear various parts. I think the oil pump and some other things, and obviously the cylinders, the bottom of those needed to be notched for the longer rods. And just a lot of stuff that you normally wouldn't run into with a stock style rebuild. So the crankshaft saved up my money, and that is an Eagle steel crank 4100 stroke. I remember that. I believe I ordered the crank and the rods from Ford Performance Solutions in California. I have no clue if they're still in business or what, but pretty sure that those two parts came from them. The rods were really offshore knockoffs. So I think the brand of those were Pacific Pro. They were H-beam, 6,200 in length, and hey, they survived. The pistons were probe pistons, shelf pistons. I'm pretty sure the block was a 4060 bore. So 4060 by 4100, we ended up at 425 cubic inches. Somehow in my college brain, that was close to 427, which made me feel all giggly inside back then when I thought of getting a Cobra. Let's see, what else can we say? Looks like I used some oil pan studs and ARP main studs for the fasteners, a Canton oil pan. Let's hop on to the next picture here and see what we can see. So here's the top end view. Looks like I used head studs as well. Pro pistons with a dish. If I remember correctly, we were sitting at about 10 and a quarter to 1 with this engine build. So here's a front shot. Apparently I wasn't too good at taking pictures back then either, but kind of an off kilter shot, but shows the timing set. Looks like probably either a Cloys or a Comp double roller with iron gear on the top. This was a hydraulic roller engine, and still remember the cam specs. It was a Comp off the shelf grind, 230 single pattern camshaft. It was 110, 106, and 530 lift. So, my very first engine, and I could improve so much on this build today that it's not even funny. And I would start with the camshaft. Nobody needs a single pattern cam in any Ford engine, pretty much. And just I didn't know what I didn't know back then. But that's how you learn. You got to start somewhere. And it looks like the camshaft was degreed, and that's a critical part of every build. And I'm glad that we did that on this build. Sorry, my throat got dry there for a second. Another thing that I cringe at is the use of a Fram oil filter. So, kind of learned early on that need to stay away from those guys. But looks like we're making progress here. Cam's being degreed, all the pistons and rods are in. Canton oil pan there in the background. So we used some Roll brand head gaskets. I remember buying those head gaskets, and I remember just sitting and staring at those head gaskets. It's odd how you feel when you've never done anything before, and you're just looking over every single part and just staring at it pretty much for the most part, just thinking about all the different facets and everything. In this picture, here's a couple more things that I kind of cringe at. I see some orange RTV in between the oil pan gasket and the block. That makes me cringe. Um, I painted the timing cover black. Sometimes you can get away with that, sometimes you can't. It depends on how slick the aluminum is. Small block Fords typically have a more shinier timing cover, and it's hard to get paint to stick to it. But things like FEs and Clevelands are pretty easy to get paint to stick to. But there is looks like a short block with an oil pan um, sitting on the stand. If you look closely underneath the oil filter, you will see some poorly executed ball peen hammer strikes to make sure that the main stud girdle clear that oil pan. So I don't use girdles today, but if I had to do that now, I would use something like a body shop dolly or something like that to not make it look so ghetto fabulous right there. In the background, you see my brand new 2002 Mustang GT 4.6 liter single overhead cam. It had several hundred miles on it before we put a 410 rear end in it. That one had a 3650 Tremec 5-speed in it. Good little running car for 260 horsepower. And looks like we're making a little progress here. We got tools scattered all over the floor. We use some Edelbrock Victor Jr. heads here, and that is another thing that I normally just wouldn't do these days. Those heads were 270, 280 CFM at the best. A nice AFR 205 head or a twisted wedge race head or something like that would have been night and day performance wise over those Victor Juniors. I bought those heads bare, bought the valves, lapped the valves in myself. Did not back cut the valves, didn't know anything about back cutting valves back then, so did the very basics and bought the valve springs, retainers, locators, locks, all of that myself, and we assembled those and learned about checking your install heights and all that sort of thing. Big mistake that I can think about now that I look back on it. I do not think that there was enough valve spring pressure. As the valves started floating at around 5,500 RPM, so it had enough cam in it to pull a little bit higher than that. But I think what I did wrong was I chose the valve springs out of the catalog just by looking at the spring loads and not really focusing on the install height that the springs were for. So I have no clue what those heads set up at, and they could have been much taller than what the springs were set up for. So that is, again, how you learn. Rocker studs and guide plates on the head there, and looks like we got a head torqued on. And here's another front shot that I forgot to include: timing cover and the head studs, and I'm pretty sure that I used a fluid damper harmonic balancer, so that's another no-no. Now know not to ever use a fluid type balancer or anything that has stuff in it that moves around, like a TCI rattler or something like that. And it looks like we're getting a little bit further along here. Got the Edelbrock water pump on. I also remember ordering that water pump from my local AutoZone, and I kept that water pump in my apartment and pulled it out and looked at it all the time. Both cylinder heads are on. The typical polished cast aluminum Ford Racing valve covers. I was doing a stint at Paul Miller Ford in Lexington. I was waiting for an engineering job, and I decided to go sell cars for a little bit. And I remember buying those valve covers through the parts departments because I got a discount. So Canton oil pan, Edelbrock heads, using some looks like Felpro intake manifold gaskets, and another cringe point is using those stupid cork end gaskets. Those deserve to be thrown in the trash every single time. Silicone only. And let's see what other pictures we got here. Then we have the gratuitous engine priming, oil pump priming picture. Dad's 1997 Cobra Mustang in the background there. And another priming picture with OEM style lifters and lifter spider and dog bones. So it looks like we're getting close in this picture. And a Victor Jr. intake manifold, not ported, heads weren't ported, just off the shelf parts. And here's some more photos of everything completely done, ready to rock and roll. And I did end up dynoing this engine, I think in March of 2003. It was just springtime beginning to pop around the corner. It was on a Stuska dyno up in Barboursville, West Virginia. And the engine made 484 horsepower at 5,400 RPM and 500 pound-feet of torque. So, all in all, not a bad combination, but I guarantee you that I could pick up about 50 horsepower at least with this combination, even those same cylinder heads, and even more so with some different heads and everything. As a matter of fact, I build some 418 cubic inch Windsors with AFR heads and just a Performer RPM air gap intake hydraulic roller that they will make 540, 550, and almost 600 pound-feet of torque. Again, very nice looking Mustang in the background. But that engine, Lakewood bell housing there, Cobra headers. So that one was ready to rock and drop in the car. I ended up with a Shell Valley Cobra replica. And that engine did go down in the car. And then I tell you guys, I can tell you that I was destined to be an engine builder from the get-go, because as soon as I finished that one, I had the itch to start another one. And what happened was I ended up pulling that engine out, selling it to a gentleman down in Suwanee, Georgia, who had another Cobra replica, and he ended up putting about 4,000 miles on it, and then he sold the car. I would give anything to know where that engine is today. And I spoke to that same gentleman last year. He was looking for the car because he wanted to have the car back. And I told him, I said, if you get that car back, you send the engine back, and I'll freshen it up free of charge, because I just want to, see it again. But I haven't seen it, no clue where it's at, and it's gone except for in memories right now. Somewhere the dyno video exists on a VHS tape. Haven't seen it in probably the better part of 20 years, but it's floating around somewhere. Alright guys, I know that this may have been completely boring to you, but I thought it was a a neat part of nostalgia to see this is where it all started. So triple digit numbers of engines later, here I am with a lot more knowledge and experience under my hat, and popping out some pretty warm engines. Hope you guys are having a good weekend. New Year's Day is coming up. Hope you have a happy New Year, and hopefully we'll all prosper in the year coming 2024. Talk to you guys later on.